They say home is where the heart is, but for most of my life, I didn't feel welcome in mine. I was told I was ungrateful, naive, and too soft for the real world. But the day I handed my father an eviction notice, he saw just how wrong he'd been. That moment didn't come out of nowhere, it was years in the making, and every step led to a door I opened myself. My name is Rachel Thomas. I'm 34 years old, a property investor in Phoenix, Arizona. I never thought I'd build a portfolio of homes before I had one to truly call my own, but life has a twisted sense of irony, especially when it involves family. Growing up, my father was the kind of man who believed toughness was shown through ridicule. He called it preparing me for the real world. I called it soul-crushing. You'll never amount to anything if you keep chasing those silly dreams. He used to sneer when I told him I wanted to be an architect. Stick to something realistic, like waiting tables. But even then, a part of me refused to let that be the end of my story. I wanted to prove him wrong. But when your self-esteem is chipped away from the inside out, it's hard to believe you can build anything solid. Still, something inside me refused to die. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the image of my 10-year-old self drawing floor plans in the back of my school notebooks, believing that someday, I'd build something that mattered. At 17, I left home with 2 trash bags full of clothes and a fire in my chest that burned hotter than his contempt. I couch surfed for a while, took night shifts at a diner, and enrolled in community college with barely enough to cover tuition. I didn't tell him. I couldn't bear to hear his voice say, "I told you so," if I failed, but as it turns out, I didn't fail. I graduated with a degree in architecture at 23. It wasn't from an Ivy League school, and I wasn't making 6 figures out of the gate, but I was proud. I had done it on my own. I even sent my father a photo at graduation. He replied with one sentence, "Still not a homeowner." It hit me like a punch to the gut. No congratulations. No pride. Just a reminder that in his eyes, I still hadn't made it. That text became my fuel. I picked up freelance drafting jobs, worked overtime at a design firm, and saved every penny. I didn't buy lattes. I didn't go out on weekends. While my friends posted selfies from brunch, I was watching YouTube videos about zoning laws and real estate investing. By 26, I bought my first fixer-upper. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. And what I did with that little house would change everything. The house was a wreck, peeling paint, a cracked foundation, and the smell of mold baked into the walls. But I poured my weekends and nights into it. I painted cabinets, laid tile, watched plumbing tutorials, and worked until my hands blistered. When I finally sold it for a profit, I stood in the driveway and cried. That crumbling house had given me something my father never could, belief in myself. I kept going. 2 more flips by age 28, then came a duplex. Then another. By 31, I owned 5 properties and managed them all myself. And not a dime of it had come from family money. Then the call came. A name I hadn't seen on my phone in almost 7 years. Dad. He didn't say hello. Just, "I need a place to stay." He didn't even ask them why. Brother had told me Dad lost his job, burned through his savings, and couldn't afford rent. He tried to move in with my brother, but 3 kids in a 2-bedroom wasn't an option. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Let him figure it out. But another part, still hungry for some kind of redemption, said yes. I placed him in one of my cleanest, safest rentals. 3 bedrooms. Fresh paint. A garden out back. Rent-free, just until you're back on your feet, I said. His reply, "Guess you finally bought something after all." Even in gratitude, he couldn't resist cutting me down. Months passed. He didn't pay a cent, didn't even say thank you. He treated the place like it was his right, not my gift. And then I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he was telling people the house was his, that he letting me help with the paperwork. I confronted him, heart pounding. He shrugged. "So what? I raised you. You owe me." No remorse. No humility. Just more entitlement. "You're living in my property. And if you can't show some respect, you can't live here," I said, my voice shaking. He scoffed. "What are you gonna do? Evict your own father?" And in that moment, I made a choice that would change everything. I said it calmly, clearly. "Yes, I am." He blinked, stunned, then laughed, like it was a joke. It wasn't. I contacted my lawyer, drafted a 30-day notice, filed the eviction. The news didn't go down well. He ranted. He cursed, said I was cold, ungrateful, that I was nothing without him. But I wasn't that scared little girl anymore. The eviction date came. I sat in my car, across the street, watching him pack his things into an old truck. He looked up once, caught my eye, and for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. It should have felt like victory. And in a way, it was. But mostly, it felt like closure. A long, overdue release, not out of revenge. Not to hurt him, but because boundaries matter, and healing sometimes means saying no. Even to your own blood. He had told me I'd never own a home. Now, I owned several. And he couldn't step foot in one without my permission. It took me years to understand that what I was chasing wasn't a title deed or a bank balance. It was approval. From someone incapable of giving it, but now, I didn't need it anymore. Today, I live in a home I designed myself. Every angle, every fixture, every inch is mine. I don't flinch when I sign new deeds. I don't second-guess my worth. Why father lives in a government-subsidized apartment across town. We talk once in a while, briefly, formally. He's still proud in all the wrong ways. Still bitter when I don't bend to his opinions. The first time he saw photos of my newest development, a 5-unit luxury townhouse complex, I could tell he wanted to say something. Maybe a backhanded compliment. Maybe another jab. Instead, he stayed silent, just nodded with tightly pressed lips. That silence said more than any insult ever could, but truthfully, I didn't need anything from him anymore. Not his words. Not his recognition. Not his presence. What I did need was peace, and for the first time in my life, I had it. I still remember the night I moved into my own personal home, the one I kept just for me, no renters, no investments, no strings. I walked through the empty rooms barefoot, listening to the soft creak of the floorboards I'd chosen, feeling the weight of everything I'd overcome. This wasn't just a house. It was a line in the sand. A declaration. I am not who you said I was. I am not small. I am not incapable. I am not dependent on anyone's approval to thrive. One afternoon not long ago, I got a call from my cousin Sarah. She was in town and wanted to see me. We hadn't spoken in years, but curiosity won out, and I invited her over. She gasped when she walked through the door. Ratch, this is incredible. I mean, I always knew you were ambitious, but, wow. I smiled. It's been a long road. She looked at me, suddenly more serious. Uncle Rick. He talks about you sometimes. Says you're doing okay, for yourself. But I don't think he realizes just how wrong he was. I laughed, not bitterly, just calmly. He doesn't need to. I didn't do any of this to prove him wrong anymore. I did it to prove myself right. That evening, Sarah and I sat on the back patio, wine glasses in hand, watching the Arizona sunset melt over the desert horizon. For the first time in a long time, I talked about the pain, the humiliation, the longing, but also the growth, the strength, the healing. And then she asked something I hadn't expected. If he apologized, would you forgive him? I sat with that for a long moment. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because it surprised even me. Yes, I said finally. But I'm not waiting on it. Healing didn't happen the moment I signed my first deed, or even after the eviction. It came in pieces, quietly, during the unglamorous days between. It came when I learned to accept compliments without deflecting, when I raised my rates without guilt, when I said no to toxic clients, toxic partners, and even toxic family members. I started mentoring young women in architecture. I created a small online course about real estate investing. I even funded a scholarship at my old community college, named in honor of my mother, who had passed quietly years before, and who had been the only one to tell me I could be anything. She never got to see what I built. But I feel her every time I walk into a space that I brought to life. And somehow, knowing she would have been proud makes up for the silence I lived with for so long. A few weeks ago, I received a letter in the mail. From him. It was short, sloppy handwriting. Unfolded once, then again. It said, I didn't know how to be a father. I guess I thought being hard on you would prepare you. But you did it all without me. You made something of yourself. I'm not good at apologies, but I hope this counts. Dad. I read it 3 times. Not because it was touching, but because part of me wondered if I had imagined it. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't poetic. But it was a sliver of something. Maybe not forgiveness, but acknowledgement, and that was enough. I placed the letter in a drawer, not framed, not displayed. Just there. A symbol of closure. A chapter finished. Not erased, not forgotten, but behind me is still. That letter lingered in my thoughts more than I expected. Not because it changed everything, but because it reminded me how far I'd come from needing it. But it also raised a question I hadn't let myself face yet. Did I want to see him again? 2 weeks after the letter, I found myself in my car, parked in front of a small, brick apartment building on the east side of town. I stared up at the window I knew was his. A pale curtain hung crooked across it. The lawn was overgrown, the stairs chipped with age. This wasn't the kind of place you chose. It was the kind you ended up in. I didn't plan to get out. I just wanted to see it. Just wanted to know what his version of a rock bottom looked like. But then I saw him through the window. He was sitting alone at a small table, his back slightly hunched, staring down at a piece of paper. A part of me hoped it was another letter he was writing. Another apology, maybe. Or maybe he was doing the crossword. Who knows? That image stayed with me. Not because it made me pity him, but because for the first time, he looked small. Just a man. Not a shadow. Not a monster. Just a man who never figured out how to love someone without breaking them down first, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing at all. That was how I knew I'd healed. The next morning, I went back to my home office and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, not for contracts or permits, but for a new blueprint, something I'd been thinking about for a long time. I wanted to create transitional housing for women leaving toxic family situations. A place where they could live rent-free for 6 months while they rebuilt, emotionally, financially, professionally, and I had the funds. I had the properties. And now, I had the clarity. I called it Haven House. Within 3 months, I had a nonprofit partner, a grant match, and volunteers. One of the first women to move in was named Tessa. 24, smart as hell, but fresh out of a verbally abusive home. She walked in carrying 2 trash bags. It didn't escape me. I saw myself in her, the same fire, the same fear, the same refusal to let her past write her future. That first night, she cried. I told her, "You're not broken. You're building, one brick at a time." And for once, I believed it wasn't just something I was saying for her. It was the truth, for both of us. A year after the eviction, I was closing up a community workshop at one of my properties when I heard a knock on the door. I turned, and there he was, older, thinner, holding a worn ball cap in his hand. "I didn't come to ask for anything," he said quickly, like he'd rehearsed it. I heard about what you're doing. With the houses. With the women." I nodded. "I'm proud of it." He looked down, nodding slowly. "You should be." There was a long silence. No one filled it. Then he said, "You did more than I ever thought possible. More than I ever let myself believe." There was pain in his eyes. And regret. But also honesty. "Maybe for the first time, I was wrong," he said. "I didn't cry. I didn't break. I didn't rush to forgive him, but I did say something that surprised even me. I know. And that was enough." Today, my key ring has more than 20 keys. Not just to properties, but to doors I've opened for myself and others. Keys to safety, dignity, independence. My father and I don't have the kind of relationship you'd write novels about. We speak twice a year. He's still learning how to show respect, and I'm still learning how to accept imperfection without letting it inside my heart. But when I handed Tessa her own key 2 months ago, her first real home, her name on the lease, her tears soaking the doormat, I realized something. It was never about the house. It was about reclaiming control. About rewriting the narrative, about deciding for myself what I was worth, and then living up to it, even when no one else could see it. So when people hear my story, how the girl who would never own a home ended up not only owning homes, but evicting the man who doubted her, they often ask, "Would you do it again?" And my answer is always the same: absolutely. Not for revenge. Not for pride. But because I needed to be the one to walk away. I needed to show the younger version of me, the one clutching her sketchbook and her dreams, that she was never crazy, never too soft, never too small. She was just early. And now, years later, with calloused hands and a healed heart, I tell that girl every day, you built this, not just the house, the life.